Okay, I think we are back. So I have been testing something I was really concerned with. Hi, Cranky Pigman. Welcome to my stream. I am going to be continuing where I left off on the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. Let me was tweaking around with some audio sources. I was tweaking around with some buttons. I have a new alert of this cute little tiger holding a sign. Um, I'm working with the creator for that one who's gonna adjust it for me. So, um, thank you for your patience. I now have a oh shit, what's happening panic button. So, um, I genuinely appreciate all of you just sticking around and being patient with me. So we've got the Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. This is the version that I'm currently reading from the Doubleday Page & Co. New York publisher in 1909. As you can see, this particular book was fabric covered. It has amazing detailing in the printing on the cover. So you have like this ornate frame with goblins and imps and cats and dogs and goats and geese and rabbits and whatnot all over it. So it's pretty well done. But we are continuing where we left off. Now, each of these stories are not numbered, so I have to kind of guess where we are as far as like the story numbers, but we've got we are going to pick up where we left off with the Wren and the Bear. Okay, let's grab that and have that ready. So we're going to probably read about another 60 pages, give or take. And that will probably be about 10 or so stories. Some of the stories are longer, like Hansel and Gretel, and some of them are very, very short, like 2, 3, 4 pages. So if everyone's ready and has your beverages and your snacks and is feeling comfortable, we can get started. And here we go. Put this right there. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. The Wren and the Bear. Once upon a time in the summer, a bear and a wolf were taking a walk in a wood when the bear heard a bird singing most beautifully, and he said, "Brother Wolf, what kind of bird is that singing so beautifully?" "That is the king of the birds, and we must bow down to it." But really, it was a wren. "If that is so," said the bear, "I should like to see his royal palace. Come, you must take me to it." "That's not so easy," said the wolf. "You must wait till the queen comes." Soon after, the queen made her appearance, bringing food in her beak, and the king came with her to feed their little ones. The bear would have liked to go in at once, but the wolf held him by the sleeve and said, "No, now you must wait till the king and queen fly away again." So they marked the opening of the nest and trudged on. But the bear had no rest till he could see the royal palace, and before long he went back. The king and the queen had gone out again. He peeped in and saw 5 or 6 young ones lying in the nest. "Is that the royal palace?" cried the bear. "What a miserable place! And do you mean to say that you are royal children? You must be changelings." When the young wrens heard this, they were furious and shrieked,
"No, indeed, we are not. Our parents are honest people. We must have this out with you."
The bear and the wolf were very much frightened. They turned round and ran home to their dens. But the young wrens continued to shriek and scream aloud, and when their parents came back with more food, they said,
"We won't touch so much as the leg of a fly, even if we starve, till you tell us whether we are really your lawful children or not. The bear has been here calling us names."
Then said the old king, "Only be quiet, and this shall be seen to." Thereupon he and his wife the queen flew off to the bear in his den and called in to him, "Old Bruin, why have you been calling our children names? It will turn out badly for you, and it will lead to a bloody war between us." So war was declared, and all the 4-footed animals were called together: the ox, the ass, the cow, the stag, the roe deer, and every other creature on the earth. But the wren called together every creature which flew in the air, not only birds, both large and small, but also the gnats, the hornets, the bees, and the flies. When the time came for the war to begin, the wrens sent out scouts to discover where the commanding generals of the enemy were to be found. The gnats were the most cunning of all. They swarmed in the wood where the enemy were assembled, and at last they hid themselves under a leaf of the tree where the orders were being given. The bear called the fox up to him and said, "You are the slyest of all the animals, Reynard. You shall be our general and lead us." "Very good," said the fox. "But what shall we have for a signal?" But nobody could think of anything. Then said the fox, "I have a fine, long, bushy tail, which almost looks like a red feather brush. When I hold my tail erect, things are going well, and you must march forward at once. But if it droops, you must all run away as hard as ever you can." When the gnats heard this, they flew straight home and told the wrens every detail. When the day broke, all the 4-footed animals came rushing to the spot where the battle was to take place. They came with such a tramping that the earth shook. The wren and his army also came, swarming through the air. They fluttered and buzzed enough to terrify one, and then they made for one another. The wren sent the hornet down with orders to seat herself under the tail of the fox and to sting him with all her might. When the fox felt the first sting, he quivered and raised one leg in the air, but he bore it bravely and kept his tail erect. At the second sting, he was forced to let it droop for a moment, but the third time he could bear it no longer. He screamed, and down went his tail between his legs. When the animals saw this, they thought all was lost, and off they ran helter-skelter, as fast as they could go, each to his own den. So the birds won the battle. When it was over, the king and the queen flew home to their children and cried, "Children, be happy! Eat and drink to your heart's content. We have won the battle." But the young wren said,
"We won't eat till the bear comes here to make an apology and says that we are really and truly your lawful children."
The wren flew to the bear's den and cried, "Old Bruin, you will have to come and apologize to my children for calling them names, or else you will have all of your ribs broken." So, in great terror, the bear crept to the nest and apologized. And at last the young wrens were satisfied, and they ate and drank and made merry till far into the night. Okay. Here we are. Questions. Um, I suppose the important takeaway here from the Wren and the Bear is that there's an emphasis on the significance of teamwork and the importance of humility. The the bear was rude. Um, he he was rude to the young wren children, and instead of apologizing then and there for being called out, they went to war, which in it of itself is absurd. So, yeah, be humble and apologize. If you're rude, I mean, sometimes you say something without thinking and it's rude. "Oh, this is your palace? Oh, gross." Or something equally just non not appropriate. And those social cues come with time. So just apologize. Be humble. Aw, thank you, Mr. Clean. Welcome to the show. Or welcome to my stream. Um, let's see. We are on. Oh, a little bit of a delay on that, but that's okay. Ta-da! Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean. We are on to the Frog Prince. So this is the Grimm's fairy tale version of the Frog Prince. So some similarities will occur, but I think it's not quite like the Disney version of the story. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, the Frog Prince. In the olden time, when wishing was some good, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so lovely that even the sun that looked on many things could not but marvel when he shone upon her face. Near the king's palace there was a large dark forest, and in the forest under an old lime tree was a well. When the day was very hot, the princess used to go into the forest and sit upon the edge of this cool well, and when she was tired of doing nothing, she would play with a golden ball, throwing it up in the air and catching it again, and this was her favorite game. Now, on one occasion, it so happened that the ball did not fall back into her hand stretched up to catch it, but dropped to the ground and rolled straight into the well. The princess followed it with her eyes, but it disappeared, for the well was so very deep that it was quite impossible to see the bottom. Then she began to cry bitterly, and nothing would comfort her. As she was lamenting in this manner, someone called out to her, "What is the matter, princess? Your lamentations would move the heart of a stone." She looked round towards the spot whence the voice came and saw a frog stretching its broad, ugly face out of the water. "Oh, it's you, is it, old Splasher? I am crying for my golden ball which has fallen into the water." "Be quiet then, and stop crying," answered the frog. "I know what to do, but what will you give me if I get you back your plaything?" "Whatever you like, you dear old frog," she said. "My clothes, my pearls and diamonds, or even the golden crown upon my head." The frog answered, I care neither for your clothes, your pearls and diamonds, nor even your golden crown. But if you will be fond of me and let me be your playmate, sit by you at table, eat out of your plate, drink out of your cup, and sleep in your little bed, if you will promise to do all this, I will go down and fetch your ball." I will do. I will promise anything you like to ask if only you will get me back my ball. Pause. I'm a hustler, baby. And I want you to know. This frog is like, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna eat your food from your plate and drink from your cup and sleep in your bed just super casually. Just okay. Surprise. I don't know. The Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm. Interesting stories. That's all I gotta say. Back to it. She thought, what is the silly old frog chattering about? Oh, okay. Yeah. She thought, what is the silly old frog chattering about? He lives in the well, croaking with his mates, and he can't be the companion of a human being. As soon as the frog received her promise, he ducked his head under the water and disappeared. After a little while back, he came with the ball in his mouth and threw it on the grass beside her. The princess was full of joy when she saw her pretty toy again, picked it up, and ran off with it. Wait, wait, cried the frog. Take me with you. I can't run as fast as you can. But what was the good of his crying, croak, croak, as loud as he could? She did not listen to him, but hurried home, and forgot all about the poor frog, and he had to go back to his well. The next day, as she was sitting at dinner with the king and all the courtiers eating out of her golden plate, something came flopping up the stairs, flip, flap, flip, flap. When it reached the top, it knocked at the door and cried, youngest daughter of youngest daughter of the king, you must let me in. She ran to see who it was. When she opened the door and saw the frog, she shut it again very quickly, and went back to the table, for she was very much frightened. The king saw that her heart was beating very fast, and he said, my child, what is the matter? Is there a giant at the door wanting to take you away? Oh, no, she said. It's not a giant, but a hideous frog. What does the frog want with you? Oh, dear father, last night, when I was playing by the well in the forest, my golden ball fell into the water, and I cried, and the frog got it out for me, and then, because he insisted on it, I promised that he should be my playmate. But I never thought that he would come out of the water, but there he is, and he wants to come in to me. Language, phrasing. He knocked at the door for the second time and sang, youngest daughter of the king, take me up, I sing. Knowest thou not what yesterday thou to me didst say? By the well in Forest Dell, youngest daughter of the king, take me up, I sing. Then said the king, what you have promised you must perform. Go and open the door for him. So she opened the door, and the frog shuffled in, keeping close to her feet till he reached her chair. Then he cried, lift me up beside you. She hesitated, till the king ordered her to do it. When the frog was put on the chair, he demanded to be placed upon the table, and then he said, push your golden plate nearer that we may eat together. She did as he asked her, but very unwillingly, as could easily be seen. The frog made a good dinner, but the princess could not swallow a morsel. At last he said, I have eaten, I have eaten enough, and I am tired. Carry me into your bedroom and arrange your silken bed that we may go to sleep. The princess began to cry, for she was afraid of the clammy frog, which she did not dare to touch, and which was now to sleep in her very pretty little silken bed. But the king grew very angry and said, you must not despise anyone who has helped you in your need. So she seized him with 2 fingers and carried him upstairs, where she put him in a corner of her room. When she got into bed, he crept up to her and said, I am tired, and I want to go to sleep as well as you. Lift me up, or I will tell your father. She was very angry, picked him up, and threw him with all her might against the wall, saying, you may rest there as well as you can, you hideous frog. But when he fell to the ground, he was no longer a hideous frog, but a handsome prince with beautiful, friendly eyes. And as her father's wish, he became her beloved companion and husband. He told her that he had been bewitched by a wicked fairy, and nobody could have released him from the spells but she herself. Next morning, when the sun rose, a coach drove up drawn by 8 milk-white horses, with white ostrich plumes on their heads and golden harness. Behind stood faithful Henry, the prince's body servant. The faithful fellow had been so distressed when his master was changed into a frog that he had caused 3 iron bands to be placed round his heart, lest it should break from grief and pain. The coach had come to carry the young pair back into the prince's own kingdom. The faithful Henry helped both of them into the coach and mounted again behind, delighted at his master's deliverance. They had only gone a little way when the prince heard a cracking behind him, as if something were breaking. He turned round and cried, "Henry, the coach is giving way." No, actually, I'm going to give him a more adult now that he's no longer a frog. "Henry, the coach is giving way." "No, sir, the coach is safe, I say. A band from my heart has fallen in twain. For long I suffered woe and pain, while you, a frog within a well, enchanted were by witch's spell." Once more he heard the same snapping and cracking, and then again. The prince thought it must be some part of the carriage giving way, but it was only the bands round faithful Henry's heart which were snapping, because of his great joy at his master's deliverance and happiness. Okay. Sure. A bit of a different take. Like clearly there's no frog kissing. He just casually sleeps in her bed. She throws him against a wall, and now he's a human again. Sure. Um for all of the shenanigans, I think the lesson that was supposed to be imparted in that story is that if you make a promise, make good on that promise. It's important to stay true to promises that you have made. Um, it can also, perhaps, from the frog's perspective, show the persistence has value. Like, be like, you made me a promise. This is you. You have to make good on that promise and be persistent. Um, if he had simply given up, the spell wouldn't have been broken. Um, if he had you showed up on her doorstep 3 times in order to hold her promise, let's see, but instead, if he showed up on her doorstep 3 times in order to hold the princess to her promise and break the spell, it you got to do what it takes. He knew what the contract was from the witch, the curse, but she didn't. Had no idea. He probably wasn't even able to speak about what the curse was. But I like how she casually just she runs away from her promise. She has to make good on it, kind of like the 12 dancing princesses from earlier in the previous stream. She has to make good on her promise and is mean. Like, she carries him with 2 fingers, refuses to eat the food because he's touching it. She flings him against a wall, and now she is the princess that is going to be married to the prince in another kingdom. And some random dude named Henry is like, "My heart is no longer breaking, hurrah!" I don't know. These stories are so funny sometimes. We are kind of in between stories, so I think I'd take a second to remind everyone, stay hydrated, grab a snack if you need one. If you need to like curl up with a blanket and relax, that is what I'm here for, is a little bit of ASMR relaxation. So, I think I am good for another 30 minutes, so I can definitely do some more stories. The cat, okay. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, The Cat and Mouse in Partnership. A cat once made the acquaintance of a mouse. And she said so much to it about her love and friendship that at last the mouse agreed to go into partnership and live with her. "We must take precautions for the winter," said the cat, "or we shall suffer from hunger. You, little mouse, dare not venture everywhere, and in the end you will get me into a fix." So the good advice was followed, and a pot of fat was purchased. They did not know where to keep it, but after much deliberation the cat said, "I know no place where it would be safer than in the church. Nobody dare venture to take anything there. We will put it under the altar and will not touch it till we are obliged to." So the pot was deposited in safety. But before long the cat began to hanker after it, and said to the mouse, "Oh, little mouse, my cousin has asked me to be godmother. She has brought a son into the world. He is white with brown spots, and I am to hold him at the font. Let me go out today, and you stay alone to look after the house." "Oh, yes," said the mouse. "By all means go, and if you have anything nice to eat, think of me. I would gladly have a drop of sweet raspberry wine myself." Now, there wasn't a word of truth in all this. The cat had no cousin, and she had not been invited to be godmother at all. She went straight to the church, crept to the pot of fat, and began to lick it. And she licked and licked and she licked and licked the whole of the top of it. Then she took a stroll on the housetops and reflected on her proceedings, after which she stretched herself in the sun and wiped her whiskers every time she thought of the pot of fat. She did not go home till evening. "Oh, there you are again," said the mouse. "You must have had a merry time." "Oh, well enough," answered the cat. "What kind of name was given to the child?" asked the mouse. "Top off," answered the cat dryly. "Top off!" cried the mouse. "What an extraordinary name! Is it a common one in your family?" "What does it matter?" said the cat. "It's not worse than crumb stealers, as your godchildren are called." Not long after, the cat was again overcome by her desires. She said to the mouse, "You must oblige me again by looking after the house alone. For the second time I have been asked to be sponsor, and as the child has a white ring around its neck, I can't refuse." The good little mouse was quite ready to oblige, and the cat stole away behind the city walls to the church, and ate half of the pot of fat. "Nothing tastes better," she said, "than what one eats by oneself." And she was quite satisfied with her day's work. When she got home, the mouse asked what this child had been named. "Half Gone." "What do you say? I have never heard such a name in my life. I don't believe you would find it in the calendar." Soon the cat's mouth watered again for the dainty morsel. "Good things always come in threes," she said to the mouse. "Again I am to stand sponsor. This child is quite black, with big white paws, but not another white hair on its body. Such such a thing only occurs once in a few years. You will let me go out again, won't you? Top off, Half Gone. They are such curious names, they set me thinking." "You sit at home in your dark gray velvet coat," said the cat, "getting your head full of fancies. It all comes of not going out in the daytime." During the cat's absence, the mouse cleared up and made the house tidy, but the greedy cat ate up all the fat. "When it's all gone, one can be at peace," she said to herself, as she went home late at night, fat and satiated. The mouse immediately asked what name had been given to the third child. "I don't know. I suppose it will please you any better," said the cat. "He is called All Gone." "All Gone!" exclaimed the mouse. "I have never seen it in print." "All gone? What is the meaning of it?" She shook her head, rolled herself up, and went to sleep. From this time, nobody asked the cat to be sponsor. But when the winter came and it grew very difficult to get food, the mouse remembered their store and said, "Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat which we have saved up. Won't it be good now?" "Yes, indeed," answered the cat. "It will do you just as much good as putting your tongue out of the window." They started off to the church, and when they got there, they found the fat pot still in its place, but it was quite empty. "Alas," said the mouse, "now I see it all. Everything has come to the light of day. You have indeed been a true friend. You ate it all up when you went to be godmother. First top off, then half gone, then—" "Hold your tongue," cried the cat. "Another word, and I'll eat you too." But the unfortunate mouse had all gone on its lips, and hardly had it come out than the cat made a spring, seized the mouse, and gobbled it up. Now that's the way of the world, you see. It just, okay, sure. That's the way of the world. This is a beautiful illustration, by the way. Absolutely stunning. I love the gradient of the ink work here and the highlighting with the red on the rooftops. The cat is just immaculate. The splotching, the striping, the M on its head, all of that. That was Arthur Rackham. That illustration is Arthur Rackham's. Just gorgeous. Um, it was wild. The cat and the mouse partnership. This story teaches us that people cannot change their own nature, right? The cat knew where the fat was, couldn't help itself, just like a cat in a house with like butter. It just couldn't stop itself. Um, and just because someone is nice to you doesn't mean that you can trust them. Like, I mean, the mouse should have known better, right? The mouse um, went into a partnership with a cat. It's natural born predator. I just don't think anything good could come of that in any scenario. That's just wild to me. Let me grab this here. Okay, we are on to another book. Talk shit, get hit. Yeah, I don't know if that was the same frame of reference, but yeah. Also, I just wanted to take a second and let my computer catch up. I feel like I'm lagging. I don't know why I'm lagging, but I'm definitely lagging. Somebody has spirited away my internet. Oh no. Whatever shall I do? It's okay. It'll all get itself sorted out eventually. We're on to the next story. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, The Goosegirl. That was, oh, I see. Talk shit, get hit. The bear was talking shit. He got hit with the wren and the wren's army. That makes sense. I mean, the true hero of that story was probably the hornet stinging the fox and like doing all the hard work. Let's see. The Goose Girl. There was once an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years, and she had a very beautiful daughter. When she grew up, she was betrothed to a prince in a distant country. When the time came for the maiden to be sent into this distant country to be married, the old queen packed up quantities of clothes and jewels, gold and silver, cups and ornaments, and in fact everything suitable to a royal outfit, for she loved her daughter very dearly. She also sent a waiting woman to travel with her and to put her hand into that of the bridegroom. They each had a horse. The princess's horse was called Falalda. Falada? Falada? Falada. I'm going to go with Falada. The princess's horse was called Falada, and it could speak. Sure. Fairy tales. When the hour of departure came, the old queen went to her bedroom and with a sharp little knife cut her finger and made it bleed. Then she held a piece of white cambric under it and let 3 drops of blood fall on it. This cambric she gave to her daughter and said, "Dear child, take good care of this. It will stand you in good stead on the journey." They then bade each other a sorrowful farewell. The princess hid the piece of cambric in her bosom, mounted her horse, and set out to her bridegroom's country. When they had ridden for a time, the princess became very thirsty and said to the waiting woman, "Get down and fetch me some water in my cup from the stream. I must have something to drink." "If you are thirsty," said the waiting woman, "dismount yourself, lie down by the water, and drink. I don't choose to be your servant." I mean, that's what you're getting paid for, but okay, I guess. So, in her great thirst, the princess dismounted and stooped down to the stream and drank as she might have not have dismounted and stooped down to the stream and drank as she might not have her golden cup. The poor princess said, "Alas!" And the drops of blood answered, "If your mother knew this, it would break her heart." The royal bride was humble, so she said nothing, but mounted her horse again. Then they rode several miles further, but the day was warm, the sun was scorching, and the princess was soon thirsty again. When they reached a river, she called out again to her waiting woman, "Get down and give me some water in my golden cup." She had forgotten all about the rude words which had been said to her, but the waiting woman answered more haughtily than ever, "If you want to drink, get the water for yourself. I won't be your servant." Being very thirsty, the princess dismounted and knelt by the flowing water. She cried and said, "Ah me!" And the drops of blood answered, If your mother knew this, it would break her heart." While she stooped over the water to drink, the piece of cambric with the drops of blood on it fell out of her bosom and floated away on the stream. But she never noticed this in her great fear. The waiting woman, however, had seen it and rejoiced at getting more power over the bride, who, by losing the drops of blood, had become weak and powerless. Now, when she was about to mount her horse Falada again, the waiting woman said, "By rights, Falada belongs to me. This jade will do for you." The poor little princess was obliged to give way. Then the waiting woman, in a harsh voice, ordered her to take off her royal robes and to put on her own mean garments. Finally, she forced her to swear before heaven that she would not tell a creature at the court what had taken place. Had she not taken the oath, she would have been killed on the spot, but Falada saw all this and marked it. The waiting woman then mounted Falada and put the real bride on her poor jade, and they continued their journey. There was great rejoicing when they arrived at the castle. The prince hurried towards them and lifted the waiting woman from her horse, thinking she was his bride. She was led upstairs, but the real princess had to stay below. The old king looked out of the window and saw the delicate, pretty little creature standing in the courtyard. So he went to the bridal apartments and asked the bride about her companion, who was left standing in the courtyard, and wished to know who she was. I picked her up on the way and brought her with me for company. Give the girl something to do to keep her from idling." But the old king had no work for her and could not think of anything. At last he said, "I have a little lad who looks after the geese. She may help him." The boy was called Little Conrad, and the real bride was sent with him to look after the geese. Soon after, the false bride said to the prince, "Dear husband, I pray you do me a favor." He answered, "That will I gladly." "Well then, let the knacker be called to cut off the head of the horse I rode. It angered me on the way." Really, she was afraid that the horse would speak and tell of her treatment of the princess. So it was settled, and the faithful Falada had to die. When this came to the ear of the real princess, she promised the knacker a piece of gold if he would do her a slight service. There was a great dark gateway to the town. There was a great dark gateway to the town through which she had to pass every morning and evening. Would he nail up Falada's head in this gateway so that she might see him as she passed? The knacker promised to do as she wished, and when the horse's head was cut off, he hung it up in the dark gateway. In the early morning, when she and Conrad went through the gateway, she said in passing, "Alas, dear Falada, there thou hangest." And the head answered, "Alas, queen's daughter, there thou gangest. If thy mother knew thy fate, her heart would break with grief so great." Then they passed on out of the town, right into the fields with the geese. When they reached the meadow, the princess sat down on the grass and let down her hair. It shone like pure gold, and when little Conrad saw it, he was so delighted that he wanted to pluck some out, but she said, "Blow, blow, little breeze, and Conrad's hat seize. Let him join in the chase, while away it is whirled, till my tresses are curled, and I rest in my place." Then a strong wind sprang up, which blew away Conrad's hat right over the fields, and he had to run after it. When he came back, she had finished combing her hair, and it was all put up again, so he could not get a single hair. This made him very sulky, and he would not say another word to her, and they tended the geese till evening. When they went home next morning, when they passed under the gateway, the princess said, "Alas, dear Falada, there thou hangest." Falada answered, "Alas, queen's daughter, there thou gangest. If thy mother knew thy fate, her heart would break with grief so great." Hey, Panda. Again, when they reached the meadows, the princess undid her hair and began combing it. Conrad ran to pluck some out, but she said quickly, "Blow, blow, little breeze, and Conrad's hat seize. Let him join in the chase, while away it is whirled, till my tresses are curled, and I rest in my place." The wind sprang up and blew Conrad's hat far away over the fields, and he had to run after it. When he came back, the hair was all put up again, and he could not pull a single hair out. And they tended the geese till the evening. When they got home, Conrad went to the old king and said, "I won't tend the geese with that maiden again." "Why not?" asked the king. "Oh, she vexes me every day." The old king then ordered him to say what she did to vex him. Conrad said, "In the morning, when we pass under the dark gateway with the geese, she talks to a horse's head which is hung up on the wall. She says, 'Alas, Falada, there thou hangest,' and the head answers, 'Alas, queen's daughter, there thou gangest. If thy mother knew thy fate, her heart would break with grief so great.'" Then Conrad went on to tell the king all that happened in the meadow, and how he had to run after his hat in the wind. The old king ordered Conrad to go out next day as usual. Then he placed himself behind the dark gateway and heard the princess speaking to Falada's head. He also followed her into the field and hid himself behind a bush, and with his own eyes he saw the Goosegirl and the lad come driving the geese into the field. Then, after a time, he saw the girl let down her hair, which glittered in the sun. Directly after this, she said, "Blow, blow, little breeze, and Conrad's hat seize. Let him join in the chase, while away it is whirled, till my tresses are curled, and I rest in my place." Then came a puff of wind, which carried off Conrad's hat, and he had to run after it. While he was away, the maiden combed and did up her hair, and all this the old king observed. Thereupon he went away unnoticed, and in the evening, when the goose girl came home, he called her aside and asked why she did all these things. "That I may not tell you, that I may not tell you, nor may I tell any human creature, for I have sworn it under the open sky, because if I had not done so, I should have lost my life." He pressed her sorely and gave her no peace, but he could get nothing out of her. Then he said, "If you won't tell me, then tell your sorrows to the iron stove there," and he went away. She crept up to the stove, and, beginning to weep and lament, unburdened her heart to it, and said, "Here I am, forsaken by all the world, and yet I am a princess. A false waiting woman brought me to such a pass that I had to take off my royal robes. Then she took my place with my bridegroom, while I have to do mean service as a goose girl. If my mother knew it, she would break her heart. It would break her heart. If my mother knew, it would break her heart." The old king stood outside by the pipes of the stove, heard all that she said. Then he came back and told her to go away from the stove. He caused royal robes to be put upon her, and her beauty was a marvel. The old king called his son and told him that he had a false bride. She was only a waiting woman, but the true bride was here, the so-called Goose Girl. The young prince was charmed with her youth and beauty. A great banquet was prepared, to which all the courtiers and good friends were bidden. The bridegroom sat at the head of the table, with the princess on one side and the waiting woman at the other, but she was dazzled and did not recognize the princess in her brilliant apparel. When they had eaten and drunk and were all very merry, the old king put a riddle to the waiting woman. "What does a person deserve who deceives his master?" Telling the whole story and ending by asking, "What doom does he deserve?" The false bride answered, "No better than this. He must be put stark naked into a barrel stuck with nails, and be dragged along by two white horses from street to street till he is dead. That is your own doom," said the king, "and the judgment shall be carried out." When the sentence was fulfilled, the young prince married his true bride, and they ruled their kingdom together in peace and happiness. That got dark really fast. Like, wow. There was just a left turn in Albuquerque dark. Just wild. Um I guess there I mean, I I could say the argument is that the waiting woman wanted what the princess had, right? She was gonna get married, she had beautiful clothes, she had a talking horse, she had all of these things that she herself wanted. Now, she was greedy. She wanted all of that. She wanted that for herself. So, in her greed, she pursued what she wanted and lost everything, and then died in a brutal fashion that she herself determined by telling that to the king. Like, "Oh, they should be thrown in a barrel with a bunch of nails and rolled down the street from street to street till they're dead." That's horrifying. Like, nothing I could describe would do it justice. That's just horrible. Um yeah, I I mean, I guess my personal take on that story would be um honor your sworn promises, but never at the risk of harm to yourself or others, right? If you make a promise and it's going to cause you harm, don't go through with that promise. I mean, you're going to have to apologize, you're going to have to do something, but I mean, she was under threat of her life, but once they were in the castle, she could have told the king then and there. It's like, "Hey, that's not the princess. I'm the princess. Here's your proof. Let's talk to the talking horse." And what was the deal with the fabric, the cambric with the 3 drops of blood? Where did that go? Is that in somebody else's tale now? What is the purpose? What would it have done if like she had kept it? I don't know. Anyway, kind of a interesting story there. We are where are we at here? We're about 7 minutes out. No fucking about Jesus. No effing. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think stand by your sworn promises, but not at harm to self or others, right? That was my takeaway from that one. That was a bit wild. Since we are so close to our next story and or ad. Let me just check to see how long this one's kind of a medium length. I'm not going to be able to read that in 6 minutes. So let me go ahead and just run that ad now so we can get it out of the way. And then I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. So we are continuing with Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, and this next story is called The Adventures of Chanticleer and Partlet. 1. How they went to the hills to eat nuts. Chanticleer said to Partlet one day, "The nuts must be ripe. Now we will go up the hill together and have a good feast before the squirrel carries them all off." "All right," said Partlet. "Come along, we'll have a fine time." So they went away up the hill, and, as it was a bright day, they stayed till evening. Now, whether they really had grown fat or whether it was merely pride, I do not know. But whatever the reason, they would not walk home, and Chanticleer had to make a little carriage of nutshells. When it was ready, Partlet took her seat in it, and said to Chanticleer, "Now you get between the shafts." Well, Teeth, I quite enjoy olives. They're quite good. I highly recommend them. These ones are mozzolina, I think. They're little pimento stuffed green olives. "That's all very fine," said Chanticleer, "but I would sooner go home on foot than put myself in harness. I will sit on the box and drive, but draw it myself I never will." As they were squabbling over this, a duck quacked out, "You thievish folk! Who told you to come to my nut hill? Just you wait, you will suffer for it." Then she rushed at Chanticleer with open bill, but he was not to be taken by surprise, and fell upon her with his spurs till she cried out for mercy. At last she allowed herself to be harnessed to the carriage. Chanticleer seated himself on the box as coachman, and cried out unceasingly, "Now, duck, run as fast as you can." Pause. Spurs? I'm going to say Chanticleer is a rooster. Or at least, I'm fairly certain. In other stories, Chanticleer is a rooster, so it just makes sense that he is here, but they don't actually say that in context. Now I don't know what Partlet is, but I suppose we'll find out. So Chanticleer is driving the coach, made of nutshells. Partlet is inside the coach, and a duck that was apparently owned the Hill of Nuts is now the horse in the traces. Wild. When they had driven a little way, they met 2 foot passengers, a pin and a needle. They called out, "Stop! Stop!" They said it would soon be pitch dark, and they couldn't walk a step further. The road was so dirty. Might they not have a lift? They had been to the tailor's inn by the gate and had lingered over their beer. As they were both very thin and did not take up much room, Chanticleer allowed them to get in, but he made them promise not to tread either on his toes or on Partlet's. Late in the evening they came to an inn, and as they did not want to drive any further in the dark, and the duck was getting rather uncertain on her feet, tumbling from side to side, they drove in. I do recall Chanticleer from Rock-a-Doodle-Doo, especially when he's cock-a-doodle-doo, like, and it goes up, and he's like defeating the evil owl. It's phenomenal. Great, great movie. The landlord at first made many objections to having them, and said the house was already full. Perhaps he thought they were not very grand folk, but at last, by dint of persuasive words, and promising him the egg which Mrs. Partlet had laid on the way, and also that he should keep the duck, who laid an egg every day, he consented to let them stay the night. I would conjecture that Mrs. Partlet is either a goose, which seems unlikely, or a chicken. Chanticleer and Partlet both being a rooster and a hen, I'm guessing. Then they had a meal served to them, and feasted, and passed the time in rioting. We're just going straight from feasting to rioting? Okay. Maybe contextually it meant something different in the 1900s. I don't know. In the early dawn, before it grew light and everyone was asleep, Partlet woke up Chanticleer, fetched the egg, pecked a hole in it, and between them they ate it all up, and threw the shells on to the hearth. Then they went to the needle, which was still asleep, seized it by the head, and stuck it in the cushion of the landlord's armchair. Yeah, post-meal riding, totally normal. The pin they stuck in his towel, and then, without more ado, away they flew over the heath. The duck, which preferred to sleep in the open air, had stayed in the yard, heard them whizzing by, and bestirred herself. She found a stream and swam away down it. It was a much quicker way to get on than being harnessed to a carriage. A couple of hours later, the landlord, who was the first to leave his pillow, got up and washed. When he took up the towel to dry himself, he scratched his face and made a long red line from ear to ear. When he went to the kitchen to light his pipe, but when he stooped over the hearth, the eggshells flew into his eyes. "Everything goes to my head this morning," he said angrily, as he dropped on the cushion of his grandfather's armchair, but he quickly bounded up again and shouted, "Gracious me!" For the needle had run into him, and this time not in the head. He grew furious, and his suspicions immediately fell on the guests who had come in so late the night before. When he went to look for them, they were nowhere to be seen. Then he swore never to take such ragamuffins into his house again, for they ate a great deal, paid nothing, and played tricks, by way of thanks into the bargain. Part 2. The Visit to Mr. Korbes. Another day, when Partlet and Chanticleer were about to take a journey, Chanticleer built a fine carriage with 4 red wheels and harnessed 4 little mice to it. Mrs. Partlet seated herself in it with Chanticleer, and they drove off together. Before long they met a cat. "Whither away?" said she. Chanticleer answered, "All on our way, a visit to pay to Mr. Korbes at his house today." "Take me with you," said the cat. Chanticleer answered, "With pleasure. Sit down behind, so that you don't fall out forwards." My wheels so red, pray have a care, from any splash or mud to spare. Little wheels hurry, little mice scurry, all on our way, a visit to pay to Mr. Korbes at his house today. Then came a millstone, an egg, a duck, a pin, and last of all, a needle. They all took their places in the carriage and went with the rest. But when they arrived at Mr. Korbes' house, he wasn't in. The mice drew the carriage into the coach-house. Partlet and Chanticleer flew on to a perch. The cat sat down by the fire. The duck lay down by the well-pole. The egg rolled itself up in the towel. The pin stuck itself into the cushion. The needle sprang into the pillow on the bed, and the millstone laid itself over the door. When Mr. Korbes came home and went to the hearth to make a fire, the cat threw ashes into his face. He ran into the kitchen to wash, and the duck squirted water into his face. Seizing the towel to dry himself, the egg rolled out, broke, and stuck up one of his eyes. He wanted to rest, and sat down in his armchair when the pin pricked him. He grew very angry, threw himself on the bed, and laid his head on the pillow, when the needle ran into him and made him cry out. In a fury, he wanted to rush into the open air, but when he got to the door, the millstone fell on his head and killed him. What a bad man Mr. Korbes must have been. How? Like, how did we get here? Like, from A to Z, we're gonna go visit Mr. Korbes. And then everybody kills him. Like, how did we get there? I don't understand. It makes no sense. Okay. Moving on. Part 3. The Death of Partlet. Oh, unrestrained merrymaking. That's good to know. Riot can also mean unrestrained merrymaking, revelry. So maybe I'm going to say that they had a feast and they were merrymaking. That would make a lot of sense rather than, breaking everything and like stealing and rioting, and it's like the food is so good. Whoosh, crash all of these things to the floor. It's like Thor from the first movie when he just like, this drink is delicious. Bring me another, and smashes it onto the ground. Yeah, that would be the kind of rioting in my head, I guess. Part 3: The Death of Partlet. Partlet and Chanticleer went to the nut hill on another occasion, and they arranged that whichever of them found a nut should share it with the other. Partlet found a huge nut, but said nothing about it, and meant to eat it all herself. But the kernel was so big that she could not swallow it. It stuck in her throat, and she was afraid she would be choked. She shrieked, Chanticleer, Chanticleer, run and fetch some water as fast as you can, or I shall choke. So Chanticleer ran as fast as he could to the well, and said, Well, well, you must give me some water. Partlet is out on the nut hill. She has swallowed a big nut and is choking. Okay, let's try that one from the top. So Chanticleer ran as fast as he could to the well and said, Well, well, you must give me some water. Partlet is out on the nut hill. She has swallowed a big nut and is choking. The well answered, First you must run to my bride and tell her to give you some red silk. Chanticleer ran to the bride and said, Bride, bride, give me some red silk. I will give the silk to the well, and the well will give me some water to take to Partlet, for she has swallowed a big nut and is choking. The bride answered, Run first and fetch me a wreath which I left hanging on a willow. Hey, I don't write this, okay? It just happens. It's not my fault. In modern context, phrasing, okay? Okay, it's phrasing. It's not my fault. The bride answered, Run first and fetch me a wreath, which I left hanging on a willow. So Chanticleer ran to the willow, pulled the wreath off the branch, and brought it to the bride. The bride gave him the red silk, which he took to the well, and the well gave him the water for it. Then Chanticleer took the water to Partlet, but as it happened, she had choked in the meantime and lay there dead and stiff. Chanticleer's grief was so great that he cried aloud, and all the animals came and condoled with him. Six mice built a little car to draw Partlet to the grave, and when the car was ready, they harnessed themselves to it and drew Partlet away. On the way, Reynard, the fox joined them. Where are you going, Chanticleer? I'm going to bury my wife, Partlet. May I go with you? Jump up behind, we're not yet full. A weight in front my nags can't pull. Okay. So the fox took a seat at the back, and he was followed by the wolf, the bear, the stag, the lion, and all the other animals of the forest. Hi, Ferrari. The procession went on till they came to a stream. How shall we ever get over? Said Chanticleer. A straw was lying by the stream, and it said, I will stretch myself across, and then you can pass over upon me. And when the 6 mice got on to the straw, it collapsed, and the mice fell into the water with it, and they were all drowned. So their difficulty was as great as ever. Then a coal came along and said, I am big enough, and I will lie down, and you can pass over me. So the coal laid itself across the stream. But unfortunately, it just touched the water, hissed, went out, and was dead. A stone, seeing this, had pity on them, and wanting to help Chanticleer, laid itself over the water. Now Chanticleer drew the car, and he just managed to get across himself with the hen. Then He wanted to pull the others over who were hanging on behind, but it was too much for him, and the car fell back, and they all fell into the water and were drowned. So Chanticleer was left alone with the dead hen, and he dug a grave and laid her in it. Then he made a mound over it and seated himself upon it and grieved till he died, and then they were all dead. What? It's just I can't. This is wild, honestly. What right? Teeth? What? So like everyone's like we're going to follow you to your wife's grave and then I don't I don't know. This is I don't know. I really don't know. Um I guess the takeaway is I don't know, cause like they're just killing everybody, right? Like Mr. Corpse living his best life. It's not like he was mean to them or stole from them. There's context missing for Mr. Corpse. Great, great little poem there in the story, but I, he's like, oh, well, we're gonna go visit Mr. Corpse, and now we're gonna hit him with a millstone, and he's dead. I don't know. Um, maybe towards the end there, the third part 3, um, all of these creatures are trying to help him carry his burden of his dead wife, and then they all die. I guess. Um, if you know or suspect somebody's in trouble, like be sure to take care of yourself first before helping them. I mean, it's unwise to do them any favors if you're going to put yourself at risk. Like the hot coal, like, oh yeah, I'll help out, and then he lies down in the water and he dies. Um, like, oh, we only have this one rock to walk across, and the rock's like, yeah, and then it's too much weight and the rock breaks, and then all of the other creatures like the bear, the lion, and so on, they all die. Like how I don't know. I don't know. These stories have been wild. That's the takeaway. Um yep. Yep. Weird stories. Very weird stories. Yeah, I think so. There's a correlation there. I'm absolutely sure. So silly. I don't know. At least we're going to what would normally be considered a classic story, I hope. Maybe, sort of, mostly, on a good day. If you squint at it, I don't know. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned. Okay. We are on to Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, Rapunzel. There was once a man and his wife who had long wished in vain for a child, when at last they had reason to hope that heaven would grant their wish. There was a little window at the back of their house, which overlooked a beautiful garden full of lovely flowers and shrubs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and nobody dared to enter it, because it belonged to a powerful witch who was feared by everybody. One day the woman standing at this window and looking into the garden saw a bed planted with beautiful rampion. It looked so fresh and green that it made her long to eat some of it. This longing increased every day, and as she knew it could never be satisfied, she began to look pale and miserable, and to pine away. Then her husband was alarmed, and said, "What ails you, my dear wife?" "Alas," she answered, "if I cannot get any of the rampion from the garden behind our house to eat, I shall die." I feel like that's a little over the top, personally, but pregnancy food cravings are what they are. Her husband, who loved her, thought, "Before you let your wife die, you must fetch her some of that rampion, and cost what it may." So In the twilight, he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, hastily picked a handful of rampion, and took it back to his wife. She immediately dressed it and ate it up very greedily, very eagerly. Greedily. Well, I would have said greedily here. Ate it up very eagerly. It was so very, very nice that the next day her longing for it increased threefold. She could have no peace unless her husband fetched her some more. So in the twilight he set out again. But when he got over the wall, he was terrified to see the witch before him. "How dare you come into my garden like a thief and steal my rampion?" she said, with angry looks. "It shall be the worse for you." "Alas, alas," he answered, "be merciful to me. I am only here from necessity. My wife sees your rampion from the window, and she has such a longing for it that she would die if she could not get some of it." The anger of the witch abated, and she said to him, "If it is as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you like, but on one condition. You must give me the child which your wife is about to bring into the world. I will care for it like a mother, and all will be well with it." In his fear, the man consented to everything, and when the baby was born, the witch appeared, gave it the name of Rapunzel, Rampion, and took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower which stood in a wood. It had neither staircase nor stairs nor doors, and only a little window quite high up in the wall. When the witch wanted to enter the tower, she stood at the foot of it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had splendid long hair, as fine as spun gold. As soon as she heard the voice of the witch, she unfastened her plaits and twisted them round a hook by the window. They fell 20 ells downward, and the witch climbed up by them. It happened a couple of years later that the king's son rode through the forest and came close to the tower. From thence he heard a song so lovely that he stopped to listen. It was Rapunzel, who in her loneliness made her sweet voice resound to pass away the time. The king's son wanted to join her, and he sought for the door of the tower, but there was none to find. He rode home, but the song had touched his heart so deeply that he went into the forest every day to listen to it. Once, when he was hidden behind a tree, he saw a witch come to the tower and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel lowered her plaits of hair, and the witch climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one ascends," he thought, "I will try my luck myself." And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The hair fell down at once, and the king's son climbed up by it. At first Rapunzel was terrified, for she had never set eyes on a man before, but the king's son talked to her kindly and told her that his heart had been so deeply touched by her song that he had no peace, and he was obliged to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear when she asked if she would have him for husband. And she saw that he was young and handsome. She thought, "He will love me better than old Mother Gothel." So she said, "Yes," and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will gladly go with you, but I do not know how I am to get down from this tower. When you come, will you bring a skein of silk with you every time? I will twist it into a ladder, and when it is long enough, I will descend by it, and you can take me away with you on your horse." She arranged with him that he should come and see her every evening, for the old witch came in the daytime. The witch discovered nothing, till suddenly Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Mother Gothel, how can it be that you are so much heavier to draw up than the young prince who will be here before long?" "Oh, you wicked child, what do you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her rage, she seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, twisted it twice round her left hand, snatched up a pair of shears, and cut off the plaits, which fell to the ground. She was so merciless that she took poor Rapunzel away into a wilderness, where she forced her to live in the greatest grief and misery. In the evening of the day on which she had banished Rapunzel, the witch fastened the plaits which she had cut off to the hook by the window, and when the prince came and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she lowered the hair. The prince climbed up, but there he found not his beloved Rapunzel, but the witch, who looked at him with angry and wicked eyes. "Ah!" she cried mockingly, "you have come to fetch your lady love, but the pretty bird is no longer in her nest, and she can sing no more, for the cat has seized her, and it will scratch your own eyes out too. Rapunzel is lost to you, you will never see her again." The prince was beside himself with grief, and in his despair he sprang out of the window. He was not killed, but his eyes were scratched out by the thorns among which he fell. He wandered about blind in the wood, and had nothing but roots and berries to eat. He did nothing but weep and lament over the loss of his beloved wife Rapunzel. In this way he wandered about for some years, till at last he reached the wilderness where Rapunzel had been living in great poverty, with the twins who had been born to her, a boy and a girl. He heard a voice which seemed very familiar to him, and he went towards it. Rapunzel knew him at once and fell weeping upon his neck. Two of her tears fell upon his eyes, and they immediately grew quite clear, and he could see as well as ever. He took her to his kingdom, where he was received with joy, and they lived long and happily together. Ha, ha, who, how the, well, I can definitely see why there was a bit of a departure in the original telling of Rapunzel to where we are now. I, hmm, okay, sure, yes. Mother Gothel received no punishment. The parents were just discarded after a handful of paragraphs, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just going to take your baby and peace." So the parents were no longer involved. Did they have more children? Did they get to keep the garden? I have many questions, no answers. Um, the next part, it's just okay. So, "Hey, you're 12 now. You're too pretty for the rest of the world. I'm just gonna lock you up in a tower. Oh, and your super long hair, that's how I'm gonna get up and down the tower." Yeah, completely scot-free. She just gets to keep the hair, I guess, and the tower, and there's no reprisal for Mother Gothel, the witch, at all. Okay, sure. Um, I suppose the moral of this story is never give up, regardless how hopeless things can be. Because, I mean, he still pursued his lady love despite her not being there and him being blind. I mean, he wandered around for 2 years, and magically she had two children. We don't know how. I mean, we can ascertain how, wink, how they got to have two children, but if if something is designed to be, it will be. I would say another moral that was taught is that children need to like grow up and learn as they grow about the world around them, and that no matter how hard we try to protect them, so like Mother Gothel was, I guess, trying to protect Rapunzel, um, they're always going to grow up whether we're paying attention or not. Um, and I guess there's something to be said for the parents and like the value of like the mother not like, "I'm gonna die if I don't eat that rampion," and the husband being, "Okay, well, I'll just steal it then." So there are consequences to being a thief. I mean, there's so many questions like, why was it the rampion? Was it magical? What made the child super pretty? What happened after? I don't know. It leaves a lot of plot holes, and I feel like there's more to be said in that story than what we have to work with. So let's go on to the next one here. Oh, this one has an actual artwork piece here. So this is a little all line work style. She did not go at once, but many times backward and forwards to the well. Some woman and some child watching her as she worked. Fundvogel, or the foundling bird. Oh, that must be the cook. Okay. If everyone is ready, we'll get started on the next story, but just a friendly reminder between stories or chapters. Stay hydrated, get yourself a snack, grab yourself some caffeine if you need it, grab a blanket, I don't know, relax, enjoy the story. As weird as it might be.
Drink water, become moist.
I suppose. Oh, stretching's a good idea.
Don't forget to stretch.
Quick thank you to the mod team for reminding me to take care of myself. And also, I just wanted to throw out a big thank you to Pandaris, who helped me with putting together all of my morals for these stories and like putting my thoughts in order. Help me do the research, help me put them together in a list cohesive with the story. So, big shout out. Let's get started on Fundvogel. That is the most German word I think I have ever said. Ooh, I'm jelly on the pizza. That would be amazing. Cozy mode engaged. I'm glad that I can provide some chill vibes for you. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. Fundvogel. There was once a forester who went into the woods to hunt, and he heard a cry like that of a child. He followed the sound and at last came to a big tree where a tiny child was sitting high up on one of the top branches. The mother had gone to sleep under the tree, and a bird of prey, seeing the child on her lap, had flown down and carried it off in its beak to the top of the tree. Either that was a very small child or a very big bird. The forester climbed the tree and brought down the child, thinking to himself, I will take it home and bring it up with my own little Lena. What about the mother that's asleep under the tree? Okay, sure. So he took it home, and the two children were brought up together. The foundling was called Fundvogel, because it had been found by a bird. Fundvogel and Lena were so fond of each other that they could not bear to be out of each other's sight. Now, the forester had an old cook who one evening took 2 pails and began carrying water. She did not go once but many times backwards and forwards to the well. Lena saw this and said, Dear me, Sanna, why are you carrying so much water? If thou wilt not tell anyone, I will tell thee why. Lena said no, she would not tell anyone. So then the cook said, Tomorrow morning, when the forester goes out hunting, I am going to boil the water, and when it bubbles in the kettle, I am going to throw Fundvogel into it to boil him. Next morning, the forester got up very early and went out hunting, leaving the children still in bed. How much time passed that the cook was like, all right, sure, let's eat the child? What? What is this, Hansel and Gretel? What happened? Like, is this just a common thing in German folklore? It's like, oh, we're just gonna eat the kids. Yeah. Okay, sure. Yee. Then Lena said to Fundvogel, "Never forsake me, and I will never forsake thee." And Fundvogel answered, "I will never forsake thee." Then Lena said, "I must tell thee now. Old Sanna brought in so many pails of water last night that I asked her what she was doing. She said if I would not tell anybody, she would tell me what it was for. So I promised not to tell anybody, and she said that in the morning when the father had gone out hunting, she would fill the kettle, and when it was boiling, she would throw thee into it and boil thee. Now we must get up quickly, dress ourselves, and run away." Pause. I just want to hearken back to before when I said, don't make a promise that causes harm to yourself or to others. By not saying anything to him, he would be turned into boiled Fundvogel. But because it was for his safety, she's like, don't forsake me when I tell you the old lady wants to boil you in a pot. So, good on her for breaking that promise. So the children got up, dressed quickly, and left the house. When the water boiled, the cook went to their bedroom to fetch Fundvogel to throw him in it. But when she entered the room and went up to the bed, both the children were gone. She was terribly frightened and said to herself, Whatever am I to say to the forester when he comes home and finds the children gone? We must hurry after them and get them back." So the cook dispatched three men servants to catch up the children and bring them back. The children were sitting near a wood, and when they saw the three men a great way off, Lena said to Fundvogel, "Do not forsake me, and I will never forsake thee." And Fundvogel answered, "I will never forsake thee as long as I live." Then Lena said, "Thou must turn into a rose bush, and I will be a rosebud upon it." When the three men reached the wood, they found nothing but a rose bush with one rosebud on it. No children were to be seen. They said to each other, "There is nothing to be done here." And they went home and told the cook that they had seen nothing whatever but a rose bush with one rosebud on it. The old cook scolded them and said, "You boobies, you ought to have hacked the rose bush to pieces, broken off the bud, and brought it home to me. Off with you at once and do it." So they had to start off again on the search. Hi, Tiger Faye. But the children saw them a long way off, and Lena said to Fundvogel, "Do not forsake me, and I will never forsake thee." Fundvogel said, "I will never forsake thee as long as I live." Then said Lena, "Thou must become a church, and I will be the chandelier in it." Now when the three men came up, they found nothing but a church with a chandelier in it, and they said to each other, "What are we to do here? We had better go home again." When they reached the house, the cook asked if they had not found anything. They said, "Nothing but a church with a chandelier in it." "You fools!" "You fools!" screamed the cook. "Why did you not destroy the church and bring me the chandelier?" Then the old cook put her best foot foremost and started herself with the three men in pursuit of the children. But the children saw the three men in the distance, and the old cook waddling behind him. Then said Lena, "Fundvogel, do not forsake me, and I will never forsake thee." And he said, "I will never forsake thee as long as I live." Lena said, "Thou must become a pond, and I will be the duck swimming upon it." When the cook reached the pond, she lay down beside it to drink it up. But the duck swam quickly forward, seized her head with his bill, and dragged her under water, so the old witch was drowned. Then the children went home together as happy as possible, and if they are not dead yet, then they are still alive. What? Um, I okay. I'm left with unreasonable questions all the time. Right? It's just like she's gonna drink up the water and then the duck drowns her. I don't know. These are Grimm's fairy tales. My expectation is that somebody's going to die in almost every story. Yeah, the average German folklore, average German folktale. Just yeah, everybody dies. Okay. It's just casual with it, I guess. All right. Let's maybe nobody will die or be injured in this next one. Fingers crossed. I almost feel like I need a death counter. It's like, oh, somebody died, up 1. Oh, 3 people died, up 3. I still am reeling over poor Mr. Corbs. All he did was like leave the house for the day and he came back and was murdered by a millstone. Just living his best life. Murdered. How how dare he? Yeah. A tailor was like I need to bring it in. All right, we're writing it in. This is so ridiculous. How dare he live his best life? Yes, accurate. Very accurate. Whew. All right. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, The Valiant Tailor. A tailor was sitting on his table at the window one summer morning. He was a good fellow, and stitched with all his might. A peasant woman came down the street crying, "Good jam for sale, good jam for sale." This had a pleasant sound in the tailor's ears. He put his pale face out of the window and cried, "You'll find a sale for your wares up here, good woman." The woman went up the 3 steps to the tailor, with a heavy basket on her head, and he bade her unpack all her pots. He examined them all, lifted them up, smelt them, and at last said, "That jam seems good. Weigh me out 4 ounces, good woman, and should it come over the 1/4 pound, it will be all the same to me." The woman, who had hoped for a better sale, gave him what he asked for, but went away cross and grumbling to herself. "That jam will be a blessing to me," cried the tailor. "It will give me strength and power." He brought his bread out of the cupboard, cut a whole slice, and spread the jam on it. "It won't be a bitter morsel," said he, "but I will finish this waistcoat before I stick my teeth into it." He put the bread down by his side, and went on with his sewing, but in his joy the stitches got bigger and bigger. The smell of the jam rose to the wall where the flies were clustered in swarms, and tempted them to come down, and they settled on the jam in masses. "Ah, who invited you?" cried the tailor, chasing away his unbidden guests. But the flies, who did not understand his language, were not to be got rid of so easily, and came back in greater numbers than ever. Pause. I like how in this story it has that level of realism that has been absurd in other stories, and that the flies are like, "We don't speak English. We're going to do whatever we like. We're having the jam." Just totally logical, normal fly stuff. So weird. The brothers Grimm were very weird. It's just okay. At last the tailor came to the end of his patience, and seizing a bit of cloth, he cried, "Wait a bit, and I'll give it you." So saying, he struck out at them mercilessly. When he looked, he found no fewer than 7 dead and motionless. "So that's the kind of fellow you are," he said, admiring his own valor. "The whole town shall know of this." Well, that 7 more to the counter. Do-do-do. In great haste, he cut out a belt for himself and stitched on it in big letters, "7 at 1 blow." "The town," he then said, "the whole world shall know of it." And his heart wagged and his heart wagged for very joy like the tail of a lamb. The tailor fastened the belt round his waist and wanted to start out into the world at once. It's okay. Thank you, Teeth. He found his workshop too small for his valor. Before starting, he searched the house to see if there was anything to take with him. He only found an old cheese, but this he put into his pocket. By the gate he saw a bird entangled in a thicket, and he put that into his pocket with the cheese. Then he boldly took to the road, and as he was light and active, he felt no fatigue. The road led up a mountain, and when he reached the highest point, he found a huge giant sitting there comfortably looking round him. The tailor went pluckily up to him and addressed him. "Good day, comrade. You are sitting there surveying the wide world, I suppose. I am just on my way to try my luck. Do you feel inclined to go with me?" The giant looked scornfully at the tailor and said, "You jackanapes, you miserable ragamuffin." "That may be," said the tailor, unbuttoning his coat and showing the giant his belt. "You may just read what kind of fellow I am." The giant read, "7 at one blow," and thought that it was people the tailor had slain, so it gave him a certain amount of respect for the little fellow. Still, he thought he would try him, so he picked up a stone and squeezed it till the water dropped out of it. "Do that," he said, "if you have the strength." "No more than that," said the tailor. "Why, it's a mere joke to me." He put his hand into his pocket and pulled out the bit of soft cheese. He squeezed it till the moisture ran out. "I guess that will equal you," said he. The giant did not know what to say, and could not have believed it of the little man. Then the giant picked up a stone and threw it up so high that one could scarcely follow it with the eye. "Now then, you sample of a mannikin, do that after me." "Well thrown," said the tailor, but the stone fell to the ground again. "Now I will throw one for you which will never come back again." So saying, he put his hand into his pocket, took out the bird, and threw it into the air. The bird rejoiced at its freedom, soared into the air, and was never seen again. "What do you think of that, comrade?" asked the tailor. "You can certainly throw, but now we will see if you are in a condition to carry anything," said the giant. He led the tailor to a mighty oak which had been felled, and which lay upon the ground. "If you are strong enough, help me out of the wood with this tree," he said. "Willingly," answered the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulder, and I will take the branches. They must certainly be the heaviest." The giant accordingly took the trunk on his shoulder, but the tailor seated himself on one of the branches, and the giant, who could not look round, had to carry the whole tree, and the tailor into the bargain. The tailor was very merry on the end of the tree and whistled. 3 tailors rode merrily out of the town, as if tree carrying were a joke to him. When the giant had carried the tree some distance, he could go no further, and exclaimed, "Look out! I am going to drop the tree." The tailor sprang to the ground with great agility and seized the tree with both arms, as if he had been carrying it all the time. He said to the giant, "Big fellow as you are, you can't carry a tree." After a time, they went on together, and when they came to a cherry tree, the giant seized the top branches where the cherries ripened first, bent them down, put them in the tailor's hand, and told him to eat. The tailor, however, was much too weak to hold the tree, and when the giant let go, the tree sprang back, carrying the tailor with it into the air. When he reached the ground again without any injury, the giant said, "What's this? Haven't you the strength to hold a feeble sapling?" "It's not strength that's wanting," answered the tailor. "Do you think that would be anything to one who killed 7 at a blow? I sprang over the tree because some sportsmen were shooting among the bushes. Spring after me if you like." The giant made the attempt, but he could not clear the tree and stuck among the branches. So here, too, the tailor had the advantage of him. The giant said, "If you are such a gallant fellow, come with me to our cave and stay the night with us." The tailor was quite willing and went with him. And when they reached the cave, they found several other giants sitting round a fire. Each one held a roast sheep in his hand, which he was eating. The tailor looked about him and thought, "It is much more roomy here than in my workshop." The giant showed him a bed and told him to lie down and have a good sleep. The bed was much too big for the tailor, so he did not lie down in it, but crept into a corner. At midnight, when the giant thought the tailor would be in a heavy sleep, he got up, took a big oak club, and with one blow crashed right through the bed, and thought he had put an end to the grasshopper. Early in the morning, the giants went out in the woods, forgetting all about the tailor. When all at once he appeared before them as lively as possible, they were terrified, and thinking he would strike them all dead, they ran off as fast as ever they could. The tailor went on his way, always following his own pointed nose. When he had walked for a long time, he came to the courtyard of a royal palace. He was so tired that he lay down on the grass and went to sleep. While he lay and slept, the people came and inspected him on all sides, and they read on his belt 7 at one blow. "Alas," they said, "why does this great warrior come here in time of peace? He must be a mighty man." They went to the king and told him about it, and they were of opinion that should war break out, he would be a useful and powerful man who should on no account be allowed to depart. This advice pleased the king, and he sent one of his courtiers to the tailor to offer him a military appointment when he woke up. The messenger remained standing by the tailor till he opened his eyes and stretched himself, and then he made the offer. "For the very purpose have I come," said the tailor. "I am quite ready to enter the king's service." So he was received with honor, and a special dwelling was assigned to him. The soldiers, however, bore him a grudge and wished him 1,000 miles away. "What will be the end of it?" they said to each other. "When we quarrel with him and he strikes out, 7 of us will fall at once. One of us can't cope with him." So they took a resolve, and went all together to the king and asked for their discharge. "We are not made," said they, "to hold our own with a man who strikes 7 at one blow." It grieved the king to lose all his faithful servants for the sake of one man. He wished he had never set eyes on the tailor, and was quite ready to let him go. He did not dare, however, to give him dismissal, for he was afraid that he would kill him and all his people and place himself on the throne. He pondered over it for a long time, and at last he thought of a plan. He sent for the tailor and said that as he was so great a warrior, he would make him an offer. In a forest in his kingdom lived 2 giants, one who, by robbery, murder, burning, and laying waste, did much harm. No one dared approach them without being in danger of his life. If he could subdue and kill these 2 giants, he would give him his only daughter to be his wife, and half his kingdom as a dowry. Also, he would give him 100 horsemen to accompany and help him. "That would be something for a man like me," thought the tailor. "A beautiful princess and half a kingdom are not offered to one every day." "Oh, yes," was his answer. "I will soon subdue the giants, and that without the 100 horsemen. He who slays 7 at one blow need not fear 2. The tailor set out at once, accompanied by the 100 horsemen. But when he came to the edge of the forest, he said to his followers, "Wait here, I will soon make an end of the giants by myself." Then he disappeared into the wood. He looked about to the right and to the left. Before long he espied both the giants lying under a tree fast asleep and snoring. Their snores were so tremendous that they made the branches of the tree dance up and down. The tailor, who was no fool, filled his pockets with stones and climbed up the tree. When he got halfway up, he slipped on to a branch just above the sleepers, and then hurled the stones one after another on to one of them. It was some time before the giant noticed anything. Then he woke up, pushed his companion, and said, "What are you hitting me for?" "You're dreaming," said the other. "I didn't hit you." They went to sleep again, and the tailor threw a stone at the other one. "What's that?" he cried. "What are you throwing at me?" "I'm not throwing anything," answered the first one, with a growl. They quarreled over it for a time, but as they were sleepy, they made it up, and their eyes closed again. The tailor began his game again, picking out his biggest stone and threw it at the first giant as hard as he could. "This is too bad," said the giant, flying up like a madman. He pushed his companion against the tree with such violence that it shook. The other paid him back in the same coin, and they worked themselves up into such a rage that they tore up trees by the roots and hacked at each other till they both fell dead upon the ground. Then the tailor jumped down from his perch. "It was very lucky," he said, "that they did not tear up the tree I was sitting on, or I should have had to spring on to another like a squirrel. But we are nimble fellows." He drew his sword and gave each of the giants 2 or 3 cuts in the chest. Then he went out to the horsemen and said, "The work is done. I have given both of them the finishing stroke, but it was a difficult job." In their distress, they tore trees up by the root to defend themselves, but all that's no good when a man like me comes, who slays 7 at a blow. "Are you not wounded?" then asked the horseman. "There was no danger," answered the tailor. "Not a hair of my head was touched." The horseman would not believe him and rode into the forest to see. There, right enough, lay the giants in pools of blood, and round about them the uprooted trees. The tailor now demanded his promised reward for the king, but he, in the meantime, had repented of his promise, and was again trying to think of a plan to shake him off. Oops, sorry. "Before I give you my daughter and the half of my kingdom, you must perform one more doughty deed." Let's snooze that real quick. "There is a unicorn which runs about in the forest doing vast damage. You must capture it." "I have even less fear of one unicorn than of 2 giants. 7 at one stroke is my style." He took a rope and an axe, and went into the wood and told his followers to stay outside. He did not have long to wait. The unicorn soon appeared and dashed towards the tailor, as if it meant to run him through with its horn on the spot. "Softly, softly," cried the tailor, "not so fast." He stood still and waited till the animal got quite near, and then he very nimbly dodged behind a tree, and the unicorn rushed at the tree and ran its horn so hard into the trunk that it had not strength to pull it out again, and so it was caught. "Now I have the prey," said the tailor, coming from behind the tree. He fastened the rope around the creature's neck, and with an axe released the horn from the tree. When this was done, he led the animal away and took it to the king. Still, the king would not give him the promised reward, but made a 3rd demand of him. Before the marriage, the tailor must catch a bear which did much damage in the woods. The huntsmen were to help him. "Willingly," said the tailor. "That will be mere child's play." He did not take the huntsmen into the wood with him, at which they were well pleased, for they had already more than once had such a reception from the boar. Boar? Oh, to catch a boar. Reread that. Still the king would not give him the promised reward, but made a 3rd demand of him. Before the marriage, the tailor must catch a boar who did much damage in the woods. The huntsmen were to help him. "Willingly," said the tailor. "That will be mere child's play." He did not take the huntsmen into the wood with him, at which they were well pleased, for they had already more than once had such a reception from the boar that they had no wish to encounter him again. When the boar saw the tailor, it flew at him with foaming mouth and gnashing its teeth, tried to throw him to the ground. But the nimble hero darted into a little chapel which stood near. He jumped out again. He jumped out again immediately by the window. The boar rushed in after the tailor, but he by the time was hoping about, the boar rushed in after the tailor, but he by this time was hopping about outside and quickly shut the door upon the boar. So the raging animal was caught, for it was far too heavy and clumsy to jump out of the window. The tailor called the huntsmen up to see the captive with their own eyes. The hero then went to the king, who was now obliged to keep his word, whether he liked it or not. So he handed over his daughter and half his kingdom to him. Had he known that it was no warrior, but only a tailor who stood before him, he would have taken it even more to heart. The marriage was held with much pomp but little joy, and a king was made out of a tailor. After a time, the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep and saying, "Apprentice, bring me the waistcoat and patch the trousers, or I will break the yard measure over your head." So, in this manner, she discovered the young gentleman's origin. In the morning, she complained to the king and begged him to rid her of a husband who was nothing more than a tailor. The king comforted her and said, "Tonight, leave your bedroom door open. My servants shall stand outside, and when he is asleep, they shall go in and bind him. They shall then carry him away and put him on board a ship which will take him far away." The lady was satisfied with this, but the tailor's armor-bearer, who was attached to his young lord, told him the whole plot. I will put a stop to their plan," said the tailor. At night he went to bed as usual with his wife. When she thought he was asleep, she got up, opened the door, and went to bed again. The tailor, who had only pretended to be asleep, began to cry out in a clear voice, "Apprentice, bring me the waistcoat, and you patch the trousers, or I will break the yard measure over your head. I have slain 7 at a blow, killed 2 giants, led captive a unicorn, and caught a boar. Should I be afraid of those who are standing outside my chamber door?" When they heard the tailor speaking like this, the servants were overcome by fear and ran away as if wild animals were after them, and none of them would venture near him again. So the tailor remained a king till the day of his death. Sure, why not? It's just okay. Sure, that makes total sense. Yeah. I think the takeaway there is, for the Valiant Tailor, the moral behind this story is that you don't have to be the strongest or the largest. Sometimes all you need is intelligence to solve problems and being more clever than the king, outsmarting the giants, by convincing the giants that they were themselves attacking each other. He lucked out. Cleverness and luck go hand in hand. And I feel like by using his mind, he was able to overcome obstacles that mere strength and brawn would not have been able to do. So, yeah, just you can be victorious. The moral is, you can be victorious by just using your brain. So, intelligence for the win. Okay, quick break here before we get into the next story. And then I'll be right back. So, bear with me a second. I swear sometimes I just come back from listening to those tunes for the that kind of be right back jazz winter theme. I just love the way that those chords transition into one another. It's just so good. The Be Right Back music is from Braden Deal, and I got that from um, Upbeat, which, if you're not familiar, I highly recommend if you're a streamer to find what suits your taste. Here, I'll post that here. So the song is called Let's Stay In by Braden Deal, and they have a ton of music that is open license for anybody to use. So, highly recommend. I think Hansel and Gretel is a little bit of a longer story, so if you haven't hydrated, I highly recommend you do so. I'm about to. Mm. Hydrate, snack, get comfortable, um, caffeinate if you need to, stretch if you need to, do whatever you need to make yourself feel the most comfortable. And let's get started. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm, Hansel and Gretel. Close to a large forest there lived a woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. They were always very poor and had very little to live on, and at one time when there was famine in the land, he could no longer procure daily bread. One night he lay in bed worrying over his troubles, and he sighed and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we have nothing for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Tomorrow morning we will take the children out quite early into the thickest part of the forest. We will light a fire and give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way back, and so we shall be rid of them." "Nay, wife," said the man, "we won't do that. I could never find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the forest. The wild animals would soon tear them to pieces." "What a fool you are," she said. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the boards for our coffins at once." She gave him no peace till he consented. "But I grieve over the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children could not go to sleep for hunger either, and they heard what their stepmother said to their father. Grethel wept bitterly and said, "All is over with us now." "Be quiet, Grethel," said Hansel. "Don't cry. I will find some way out of it." When the old people had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door, and slipped out. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles round the house shone like newly minted coins. Hansel stooped down and put as many into his pockets as they could hold. Then he went back to Grethel and said, "Take comfort, little sister, and go to sleep. God won't forsake us." And then he went to bed again. But the day broke. Before the sun had risen, the woman came and said, "Get up, you lazy bones. We are going into the forest to fetch wood." Then she gave them each a piece of bread and said, "Here is something for your dinner, but mind you don't eat it before, for you'll get no more." Grethel put the bread under her apron, for Hansel had the stones in his pockets. Then they all started for the forest. When they had gone a little way, Hansel stopped and looked back at the cottage. He did the same thing again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you stopping to look back at? Take care and put your best foot foremost." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my white cat. It is sitting on the roof, wanting to say goodbye to me." Little fool, that's no cat, it's a morning sun shining on the chimney. It's the morning sun, okay. Little fool, that's no cat, it's the morning sun shining on the chimney. But Hansel had not been looking at the cat. He had been dropping a pebble on the ground each time he stopped. When they reached the middle of the forest, their father said, "Now, children, pick up some wood. I want to make a fire to warm you." Hansel and Gretel gathered the twigs together and soon made a huge pile. Then the pile was lighted, and when it blazed up, the woman said, "Now lie down by the fire, rest yourselves while we go and cut wood. When we have finished, we will come back to fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when dinner time came, they each ate their little bit of bread, and they thought their father was quite near because they could hear the sound of an axe. It was no axe, however, but a branch which the man had tied to a dead tree and which blew backwards and forwards against it. They sat there such a long time that they got tired, their eyes began to close, and they were soon fast asleep. Let me open this, check out this image here. So we have the house with the windows and the door. Hansel picked up the glittering white pebbles and filled his pockets with them. So this is him at night while the parents were sleeping, picking up all the white stones. Kind of hard to tell that that's what he's doing, but, you know, impression is there. It was no axe, however, but a branch which the man had tied to a dead tree, and which blew backwards and forwards against it. They sat there such a long time that they got tired. Their eyes began to close, and they were soon fast asleep. When they woke, it was dark night. Grethel began to cry, "How shall we ever get out of the wood?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Wait a little till the moon rises, then we will soon find our way." When the full moon rose, Hansel took his little sister's hand, and they walked on, guided by the pebbles, which glittered like newly minted money. They walked the whole night, and at daybreak they found themselves back at their father's cottage. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw Hansel and Grethel, she said, "You bad children! Why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you did not mean to come back any more." But their father was delighted, for it had gone to his heart to leave them behind alone. Not long after, they were again in great destitution, and the children heard the woman at night in bed say to their father, "We have eaten up everything again but half a loaf, and then we are at the end of everything. The children must go away. We will take them further into the forest so that they won't be able to find their way back. There is nothing else to be done." The man took it much to heart and said, "We had better share our last crust with the children." But the woman would not listen to a word he said. She only scolded and reproached him. Anyone who once says A must also say B, and as he had given in the first time, he had to do so the second also. The children were again wide awake and heard what was said. When the old people went to sleep, Hansel again got up, meaning to go out and get some more pebbles, but the woman had locked the door, and he couldn't get out. But he consoled his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Grethel. Go to sleep. God will help us." In the early morning, the woman made the children get up and gave them each a piece of bread, but it was smaller than the last. On the way to the forest, Hansel crumbled it up in his pocket and stopped every now and then to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping to look about you for?" asked his father. "I am looking at my dove which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Little fool," said the woman, "that is no dove, it is the morning sun shining on the chimney." Nevertheless, Hansel strewed the crumbles. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Nevertheless, Hansel strewed the crumbs from time to time on the ground. The woman led the children far into the forest, where they had never been in their lives before. Again they made a big fire, and the woman said, "Stay where you are, children, and when you are tired you may go to sleep for a while. We are going further on to cut wood, and in the evening when we have finished we will come back and fetch you." At dinner time Grethel shared her bread with Hansel, for he had crumbled his up on the road. Then they went to sleep, and the evening passed, but no one came to fetch the poor children. It was quite dark when they woke up, and Hansel cheered his little sister and said, "Wait a bit, Grethel, till the moon rises, then we can see the breadcrumbs which I scattered to show us the way home." When the moon rose, they started, but they found no breadcrumbs, for all the thousands of birds in the forest had pecked them up and eaten them. Hansel said to Grethel, "We shall soon find the way." But they could not find it. They walked the whole night, and all the next day from morning till night, but they could not get out of the wood. They were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries which they found. They were so tired that their legs would not carry them any further, and they lay down under a tree and went to sleep. When they woke in the morning, it was the third day since they had left their father's cottage. They started to walk again, but they only got deeper and deeper into the wood, and if no help came, they must perish. At midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a tree. It sang so beautifully that they stood still to listen to it. When it stopped, it fluttered its wings and flew round them. They followed it till they came to a little cottage, on the roof of which it settled itself. When they got quite near, they saw that the little house was made of bread, and it was roofed with cake. The windows were transparent sugar. "This will be something for us," said Hansel. "We will have a good meal. I will have a piece of the roof, Grethel, and you can have a bit of the window. It will be nice and sweet." Hansel stretched up and broke off a piece of the roof to try what it was like. Grethel went to the window and nibbled at that. A gentle voice called out from within, "Nibbling, nibbling like a mouse, who's nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind doth blow from heaven to earth below," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who found the roof very good, broke off a large piece for himself, and Grethel pushed a whole round pane out of the window and sat down on the ground to enjoy it. All at once the door opened, and an old, old woman, supporting herself on a crutch, came hobbling out. Hansel and Grethel were so frightened that they dropped what they held in their hands. But the old woman only shook her head and said, "Ah, dear children, who brought you here? Come in and stay with me. You will come to no harm." "Yeah, right, lady." She took them by the hand and led them into the little house. A nice dinner was set before them, pancakes and sugar, milk, apples, and nuts. After this she showed them 2 little white beds into which they crept, and felt as if they were in heaven. Although the old woman appeared to be so friendly, she was really a wicked old witch who was on the watch for children, and she had built the bread house on purpose to lure them to her. Whenever she could get a child into her clutches, she cooked it and ate it, and considered it a grand feast. Witches have red eyes and can't see very far, but they have keen scent like animals, and can perceive the approach of human beings. When Hansel and Grethel came near her, she laughed wickedly to herself and said scornfully, "Now I have them, they shan't escape me." She got up early in the morning, before the children were awake, and when she saw them sleeping with their beautiful rosy cheeks, she murmured to herself, they will be dainty morsels." She seized Hansel with her bony hand and carried him off to a little stable, where she shut him up with a barred door. He might shriek as loud as he liked. She took no notice of him. Then she went to Grethel and shook her till she woke and cried, "Get up, little lazy bones, fetch some water and cook something nice for your brother. He is in the stable and has to be fattened. When he is nice and fat, I will eat him." Grethel began to cry bitterly, but it was no use. She had to obey the witch's orders. The best food was now cooked for poor Hansel, but Grethel only had the shells of crayfish. The old woman hobbled to the stable every morning and cried, "Hansel, put your finger out for me to feel how fat you are." Hansel put out a knuckle bone, and the old woman, whose eyes were dim, could not see, and thought it was his finger, and she was much astonished that he did not get fat. When 4 weeks had passed, and Hansel still kept thin, she became very impatient, and would wait no longer. "Now then, Grethel," she cried, "bustle along and fetch the water, fat or thin. Tomorrow I will kill Hansel and eat him." Oh, how his poor little sister grieved as she carried the water, and the tears streamed down her cheeks. "Dear God, help us," she cried. "If only the wild animals in the forest had devoured us, we should at least have died together." "You may spare your lamentations. You may spare your lamentations for your women." Sorry, 80s flashback there. "You may spare your lamentations. They will do you no good," said the old woman. Early in the morning, Grethel had to go out to fill the kettle with water, and then she had to kindle a fire and hang the kettle over it. "We will bake first," said the old witch. "I have heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Grethel towards the oven and said, "Creep in and see if it is properly heated, and then we will put the bread in." She meant, when Grethel had got in, to shut the door and roast her. But Grethel saw her intention and said, "I don't know how to get in. How am I to manage it?" "Stupid goose!" cried the witch. "The opening is big enough. You can see that I can get into it myself." She hobbled up and stuck her head into the oven. But Grethel gave her a push, which sent the witch right in, and then she banged the door and bolted it. "Oh, oh!" she began to howl horribly, but Grethel ran away and left the wicked witch to perish miserably. Grethel ran as fast as she could to the stable. She opened the door and cried, "Hansel, we are saved! The old woman is dead. The old witch is dead." Ding dong, the witch is dead. The witch is dead. Sorry. Again, flashes. This is the photo of Grethel and the old woman here, the old witch. Let's look at this. Walking around with her cane, her crutch, holding on to Grethel, keeping her in place.
"As you can see, you could just climb into it. It's big enough."
Yeah. Yeah, it is, old woman. It really is. Hansel sprang out like a bird out of a cage when the door is set open. How delighted they were! They fell upon each other's necks and kissed each other and danced about for joy. As they had nothing more to fear, they went into the witch's house, and they found chests in every corner full of pearls and precious stones. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel as he filled his pockets. Grethel said, "I must take something home with me too," and she filled her apron. "But now we must go," said Hansel, "so that we may get out of this enchanted wood." Before they had gone very far, they came to a great piece of water. "We can't get across it," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge." "And there are no boats either," answered Grethel. "But there is a duck swimming. It will help us over if we ask it." So she cried, "Little duck that cries quack, quack, here Grethel and here Hansel stand. Quickly take us on your back. No path nor bridge is there at hand." The duck came swimming towards them, and Hansel got on its back and told his sister to sit on his knee. No, answered Grethel, it will be too heavy for the duck. It must take us over one after the other. The good creature did this, and when they had got safely over and walked for a while, the wood seemed to grow more and more familiar to them. And at last they saw their father's cottage in the distance. They began to run, and rushed inside, where they threw their arms round their father's neck. The man had not had a single happy moment since he had deserted his children in the wood, and in the meantime his wife was dead. So casual with it. Sure, okay. Grethel shook her apron and scattered the pearls and precious stones all over the floor, and Hansel added handful after handful out of his pockets. So all their troubles came to an end, and they lived together as happily as possible. Sure, why not? Okay. Just casually, while they were gone, the wife died, and it's like, so he's miserable. He abandoned his children because his wife, second wife, their stepmother, convinced him to, and then somehow she mysteriously died while they were gone for, what was it, like 3 days plus 4 weeks plus however long it took them to come home. So let's just say 5 weeks. And during that 5 weeks, she mysteriously died. We don't know. We'll never know. We can only ponder and guess. Wild. Absolutely wild. I think the takeaway from that absurd classic is that working together and thinking ahead can help someone get out of even the most dangerous situations. Like Hansel's like, you know what? We're going to have to go in the wood tomorrow. I'm going to gather up all of these little white stones so I can see my way back. And then proceeds to create a path for them to return by the first time. And then it happens again. And he's like, all I got is this bread. Let's try this. That doesn't work. Well, we have to keep going, keep pursuing something, and figure out how to get out of the wood. And then it, they run into the witch, and she snatches them up and puts them, puts him in the stable and puts her to work. And so then over that 4 weeks, she concocts a plan and is like, all right, I'm going to just shove the witch in as soon as she tries to kill my brother, so that way I can save him. And so she does. So I think just think ahead, take your time, take into consideration the situation, and find solutions, right? The moral is, work together, think ahead, and also don't trust strangers. Random old witch is like, oh, I'm just gonna feed you from my candy house. Here's some bread, here's some cake for my roof, here's a solid glass sugar pane. Totally normal. And and then she's like, oh, and by the way, I'm just gonna eat your brother, and then eventually I'll probably eat you too, but you gotta work for it. So just the casual cannibalism in Grimm's German folk tales has just been wild to me this entire time. It's just been a wild ride. Yeah. I think that's the 19th story. I'm not 100% sure. I've been trying to keep track in my head, but it's been wild. Okay. I've got 30 more minutes. I think I can do one more. Probably pretty easily. Is everyone doing okay? Everyone staying hydrated? In my case, eating olives. Is everyone having their snacks and whatnot that they need? Maybe. Yay, nay. Let's get started. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage went into partnership. They kept house together long and amicably, and thus had increased their possessions. It was the bird's work to fly to the forest every day and bring back wood. The mouse had to carry water, make up the fire, and set the table, while the sausage did the cooking. That makes sense. Whoever is too well off is always eager for something new. That tracks. One day the bird met a friend to whom it sang the praises of its comfortable circumstances. But the other bird scolded it and called it a poor creature who did all the hard work, while the other two had an easy time at home. For when the mouse had made up the fire and carried the water, she betook herself to her little room to rest, till she was called to lay the table. The sausage only had to stay by the hearth and take care that the food was nicely cooked. When it was nearly dinner time, she passed herself once or twice through the broth and the vegetables, and they were then buttered, salted, and flavored, ready to eat. Then the bird came home, laid his burden aside, and they all sat down to table. And after their meal, they slept their fill till morning. It was indeed a delightful life. Another day, the bird, owing to the instigations of his friend, declined to go and fetch any more wood, saying that he had been drudged long enough and had only been their dupe. They must now make a change and try some other arrangement. In spite of the fervent entreaties of the mouse and the sausage, the bird got his way. They decided to draw lots. And the lot fell on the sausage, who was to carry the wood. The mouse became the cook, and the bird was to fetch water. What was the result? The sausage went out into the forest, and the bird made up the fire, while the mouse put on the pot and waited alone for the sausage to come home, bringing wood for the next day. But the sausage stayed away so long that the other two suspected something wrong, and the bird flew out to take the air in the hope of meeting her. Not far off he fell in with a dog, which had met the poor sausage and fallen upon her as lawful prey, seized her, and quickly swallowed her. I'll open that image up here, see the up-close image of the sausage. The sausage and the mouse. It's just casually with a fork in his hand. Why not? Looks like something out of Alice in Wonderland. It's so absurd. He's just chilling with his fork in one hand and the pan in the other. I'm sorry, the sausage was a lady. My apologies. The bird complained bitterly to the dog of his barefaced robbery, but it was no good, for the dog said he had found forged letters on the sausage, whereby her life was forfeit to him. The bird took the wood and flew sadly home with it, and related what he had seen and heard. They were much upset, but they determined to do their best they could and stay together. So the bird laid the table, and the mouse prepared their meal. She tried to cook it, and like the sausage, to dip herself in the vegetables as to flavor them. But before she got well into the midst of them, she came to a standstill, and in the attempt lost her hair, skin, and life itself. When the bird came back and wanted to serve up the meal, there was no cook to be seen. The bird, in his agitation, threw the wood about, called and searched everywhere, but could not find his cook. Then, owing to his carelessness, the wood caught fire, and there was a blaze. The bird hastened to fetch water, but the bucket fell into the well, and the bird with it. He could not recover himself, and so he was drowned. So they're really casual with the murder. Here he is bringing back a whole bundle of sticks. So the sausage did her job cooking. She would dip herself into the food and flavor it, which is weird on so many levels. The bird would go out, fetch up sticks, which the bird was fully equipped to do and like capable of doing. And then the mouse would fetch the water, set up the cooking fire, lay the table, with her cute little mouse hands. I just, in my head, she's just like frittering away, laying out the plates, laying out silverware, just real efficient and detail oriented. And so some other bird is like, "Yo, you're doing all the hard work, and they're getting to benefit. You should, change it up." One, if it was working so well, why mess with the good thing? I mean, each one of them was doing the task that they were the best suited to do. The bird to fetch the wood, the mouse to fetch the water, the sausage to do the cooking and flavor the food. So weird. So weird. Um I honestly don't know what to say. It's just so strange. It's like casually the sausage is just chilling. Um let's see. This next one's kind of longer and I think I'm going to save that for next time and I'm going to stop here. Um that was weird, guys. I think that last one with the sausage probably one of the weirder ones. But I have to say the art though, that sausage is really really funny. That is probably my favorite illustration to date. I did like the painting of the cat though from the cat and the mouse partnership. I like that one as well. But this one is just so silly and just so very, Alice in Wonderland-esque with its silliness. The sausage is even wearing little checkered loafers. Just, okay, why not? So, well, here we are. I think that's good for today. We'll start on Mother Hulda next year. Ha ha ha. Um, It is, I would normally be reading on Sunday, but Sunday is New Year's Eve, and it's the end of the year. And in true, like, Alaskan, like, wilderness fashion, I'm going to go up to the mountains away from technology and people. Nothing against people. I think people are great. It's just sometimes I need time to, like, decompress and reflect in the magical wilderness that Alaska has in store. And so I, my dogs, and my phone full of audiobooks will be traversing the mountains and snug as a bug in a rug in a cabin. And before you get too worried about it, it is on the major roadway. And there is a hot tub there and there's a kitchen there. I will be very fine. I just want to go relax a little bit. So, with that in mind, those of you wonderful watchers that were hanging out with me today, let me see who's available and we can pop on over and say hello. So, let's see. What do we got here? We'll put this over here and pull up Twitch. Da, 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 da. Yep. Hot tubs under a cold night sky with hardly any man-made light conveyances. So I'll be able to relax and have a good time. Let's see. What we got here? So I've got a number of friends are playing various games. I have my friend is playing Deep Rock Galactic Slightly Stupid Bear. My friend the Bone Caller is playing Sirico's Shadows Die Twice. Basil's playing Lethal Company. I think that's a little bit too crazy for me right now. But let's go visit Bone Caller. I think that would be nice. He's got a small group of folks. I know him best for his playing Sea of Thieves. Oh,
Drink
yes.
water.
Must assuredly,
Become
Greebles. Stay hydrated. Let's grab this here. Okay. Da 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 da. Oh, it's the bone collar. I'm so silly. Okay. Let's go hang out with Bone Collar. If everyone is ready, let's go for a quick hop over there. I appreciate all of you listening today. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week. And alley-oop.